keyboard to the boardroom. This is the business of esports. As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post-podcast live stream. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Barada, Jeff the Juice Cohen, Lindsay the Boss Poss. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do here is we cover all the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. And the best part is we get to do it live with you guys. If it's your first time here, welcome. We encourage you to participate. I know so many of you who watch just lurk, but we really encourage you guys to get involved, ask questions, get in our faces. It makes it that much more fun for all of us. And if you're new here, welcome. If you're a regular here, also welcome. How are you doing, Lindsay? How was your week?
It's been a really good week. We've been recording a lot of episodes, and I've been meeting with a lot of really great people, and it's been a good week. Yeah. I don't know. How's everyone else doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Whoa, okay. Yeah, I'm doing good. I have so many things to say. I was muted in the pre-room. Jimmy, I'm wearing your shirt. That was the first thing I was going to say. Second thing, we just did an awesome episode of Meta Business. It really was the best one yet. Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm happy. And I'm drinking my hot chocolate, as I do every week.
Worth noting that I'm also wearing Jimmy's shirt. So we're all wearing Jimmy's clothing, it seems. But I've got this beautiful jersey that was gifted to me by Jimmy that has Meta TV on one side and the business of esports on the other side. And it says the profit on the back, of course. But no, great point, guys. Jeff and I co-host the Meta Business podcast, which everyone should subscribe to. And Lindsay hosts the Meta Woman podcast, which you should absolutely also subscribe to and follow. I listened to the last episode. It was a lot of fun. So definitely go check that out. And Francois says, good evening. Good evening, Francois. Welcome. Jimmy, since we're all wearing your clothes, how are you doing this week?
Flattered, I guess, that everyone's wearing my clothing and likes what they have. I don't know. I'm doing all right. Feeling a little sleepier than normal this entire week. I hope it's not a trend for 2022, but yeah.
Don't tell me you don't have COVID, right?
Oh no, I've tested. I am one of those few people that have never gotten COVID up until this point. So I just think I'm. You know what it was during the break, my fiance Maria and I were watching a lot of late night movies or having late nights with family. And I'm normally an early to bed kind of guy because, you know, I'm from California and all of our crew at Holodecks in New York, and I like to be up a little earlier. So at least the time difference isn't as drastic. And so I think it's just reacclimating myself is probably what it is.
Well, here you go. Einub says, absolutely agree with Jimmy. This week has been a drag. So you've got a friend there. Yeah. I don't know who this is, but I'm guessing it's Robert because I feel like Robert comes in with the hello, but it says LinkedIn users. So I don't know who it is. Guys, just to let me just tease the podcast. This week we had Josh Otero from Nutrigamer. So they're they've got this really great. It's not an energy drink. It's a drink for gamers to improve your performance, mental health, all those good things. Very healthy, not filled with sugar, and it's a very interesting product in the gamer space. And so lots of discussion around consumer packaged goods and the challenges there and the opportunities there. Very different, I think, from our normal podcast, which is good, and a lot of good insight. So highly recommend checking that out, guys, because there was a lot of good discussion. Do we want to jump into some news, guys, this week? I mean, that's what we do here, right? I will say, let me just tease, a lot of interesting news this week. And we do have a chair review this week. So everyone's favorite segment, Jeff. I know Jeff asked specifically. He was upset that last week we didn't have a real chair review, but this week we absolutely do. So let's talk about some business of gaming stuff, guys. And there was a lot to unpack this week. And I want to start with a story that I felt did not get much play at all. I felt like this flew right under the radar, but it's one of those the prophet was right stories. And I'll share it here so you guys can see. The headline is Tencent to buy Xiaomi's Black Shark gaming division for $470 million. So this is a report claiming that Tencent Games is about to acquire Xiaomi's Black Shark gaming division in a deal worth about 3 billion Chinese yen. And that's about $470 million US. Now, for those of you who don't know, Black Shark makes gaming phones primarily. So Tencent, it says, had struck partnerships with various smartphone makers, including Asus and Nubia. With Black Shark, it says the company might be able to take its business overseas, as well as given that Xiaomi's division has already penetrated some big markets. So this is a gaming phone manufacturer fundamentally, and Tencent, it's rumored, this is a report, it's not confirmed, is looking to buy it. So I think we can conclude, assuming that the rumors and the reports are true, Tencent Games specifically, getting into the gaming phone business. Jeff, I know you have thoughts on this.
The prophet was right.
The prophet was right.
Number one. That should be the number one lesson.
That is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not entirely sure how Tencent getting into the phone business makes a ton of sense for them. Like, I don't, and mainly because I don't see phones as kind of, people don't buy phones for gaming reasons, like for games. Like, I could understand why a console manufacturer would get into building games, right? You need games to push exclusive content, to move machines. However, with phones, like, I just don't see that many people who buy their phones because there's a game on it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this has certain specs and this is the market that they're going after. But to me, you buy your phone and then a game is just something that's on there. So I don't necessarily see the industrial logic to vertically integrating hardware and software in that case. But I guess maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, Jimmy, do you think this solves the Fortnite in China question, right? And I know I'm like tying this to a much bigger problem here, but hear me out, right? Tencent buys a gaming phone manufacturer. Tencent owns a big chunk of Epic, right? Now they can offer Fortnite on their own phone, on a Tencent phone in China, and it's the only place you can play Fortnite in China. It's the only place maybe you can play PUBG in Asia, right? Or like pick a number of games that are exclusive to Tencent. Maybe League in China, right? Or like the Wild Rift, right? Which is their mobile version of League. I don't know. Could you not see exclusives driving mobile phone sales, especially in Asia?
I think it depends on the Asian countries, right? Because there's also restrictions on the amount of game time that in China that they can play right now. Green of Free Fire, and it's hard because we have such a Western view of what games are popular, right? And I just threw out Green of Free Fire, which is massive over there. And you mentioned Wild Rift. I get the question, right? Which is, hey, they have a lot of exclusive titles. Now they can pair it with this phone and drive phone sales. Um, I don't, I'm not a big fan of exclusivity because I think to get more users to play your product, you need to put it on as many platforms as you can. That's what music did. They said, hey, we're getting all of our songs pirated, and why don't we stop selling $17 CDs and instead put it on every single streaming service or release a bunch of free EPs? And that was a pretty successful model for them. So I mean, the future, or at least a big part of the future of esports and of gaming in general, is definitely mobile. So for that reason, I love it. There was an indication that this company had a lot of success overseas and in outside countries, and for that reason, I think it's interesting. But if the question is this going to get Fortnite back in China? That would be the reason. That would be where my interest kind of stops.
I just want to read. Lynette says, hello, everyone. Lynette, welcome. Great to see you here. And Christopher says, good evening. Good evening, Christopher. I just want to read his comment. People will continue to buy phones for games just because of mobile gaming growth and opportunity, especially once everything goes to AR, in my humble opinion. I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, Lindsay, my question for you is, and Jeff mentioned this, the prophet was right. What did I say? That the developers like Tencent, like Epic, who are all fed up paying Apple's tax for their marketplace, instead of complaining, could go make their own phones, make their own app stores, right? Do all those things that they think is so trivial and not worth the 30% tax. Did someone at Tencent just listen to me, Lindsay, or do you think they're out to lunch with this?
Well, I totally think that the mobile game or the phone market in China is so different. In the US, we're just so heavily dominated by Apple that the consumer preference there is kind of the game companies like Epic are sort of at the mercy of that preference, especially in this market. But in Asia, it's completely different. I don't know if you all have seen, but OnePlus is a different Chinese phone manufacturer that's gotten a lot of traction lately. It's been in a lot of YouTube ads. I know people who have bought Huawei phones and all kinds of stuff from like Chinese phone manufacturers, and they actually are like really interesting, super capable phones, but the American market is just so uninterested in that. So I don't know if this play would work for Epic, but I totally think it works for Tencent, where they're much more about software and hardware accessibility and applicability rather than brand awareness. There's just much different motivations there. And I think that this is going to be really successful. If Epic did it in the US, I don't think that they would be able to overcome Apple's brand hold on most of the market here.
Maybe not. And it may just be niche if they come to the US. It's not clear. But I do think this is step one. And I love that they took this step because I think they have no other choice. Because you either accept the Apple toll, right? To be on their marketplace, to be on their store, because it gets you onto 1 billion phones, or you go make your own, right? But the complaining about it to me was always the criticism I had of Epic, because I think what will happen, ironically enough, is this will most likely fail because making hardware is difficult. It's not like making games. And, 5 years from now, we won't hear about Tencent in the phone business, but they will have learned an important lesson, which is paying 30% to Apple probably is worth it, right? Like they will have learned it the hard way, and it's already cost them $500 million here. I will love to see how much they sink into trying to get around the Apple tax. That's, to me, what is that number is the most interesting part of this whole conversation.
I mean, do you think Tencent's worried about that, though? I wouldn't think that they would be as concerned about Apple and the 30% tax so much as they are about all the different Chinese restrictions and having their own hardware out there to be able to play the games. And it's their motivations seem quite different to me.
I would think restrictions, and when it gets them around any tax, right? Whether it's Apple, whether it's Google, whether it's Chinese regulation, whether it's right, it gives them their own platform that they control. I just think they've massively underestimated how costly it is to build your own platform that you control.
I think the only way it would be worth it is if they viewed this as them building basically an app store, right? Because just saving the 30%, you're never going to be able to justify making smartphones and putting all that cost up. I do think if you're saying, hey, we're going to be the Apple of China, based on this phone, because everyone wants to play the exclusive game, so it becomes the most popular phone, and then we create the monopoly app store, then maybe the juice becomes worth the squeeze. But I just think if you're just trying to save 30%, like there's no way that math makes sense. To your point,
Juice in the squeeze. I see what you did there.
No, your point may be correct, Jeff. Right? Like I'd have to sort of think through the numbers, and I'm sure there's back of the envelope math we could do, right? In terms of what Tencent gives up on the 30% just on Fortnite, for example, when Fortnite was on Apple. But I feel like they've consistently underestimated how difficult this is, and to sink $500 million, I admire the conviction at the very least, right? I admire that this was the only path outside of walled gardens of any kind that you have, is to go build your own platform, and maybe this is the start of that. So interesting one to watch. I want to stay on the mobile side, guys, because there was another really big mobile story. Actually, let me just get Greg's comment here before I move on. It says Tencent is not naive enough to think this would get them around Chinese control. Tencent appears to be following President Xi's directives. I mean, Greg, that's been like a recurring question on this live stream, which is like, how rogue is Tencent within the Chinese regime, right? Like, are they immune because they're so big? Are they able to push back? Are they completely at the mercy of the regime? I feel like it's not clear, not to me at least.
I'm not sure I understand the point of how would this get them around the Chinese control? Wouldn't it be even worse?
I mean,
how would having their own hardware?
If it's your own hardware platform, it may be more difficult to regulate and to like actually physically control. But you're right. I mean, the Chinese government could do anything. Could tell them to stop selling phones. Could literally do anything they want. I just wonder if they think it gives them some kind of advantage. I don't know. It's a good point. And to Greg's point, I think they're probably not. They probably know very well what they can and can't get away with. I really think this has more to do with the App Store taxes and walled gardens than Chinese control. But there was another really big mobile story, guys, and that is Zynga in the news. And the headline, this is directly from the press release. The headline here, Take-Two and Zynga to combine, bringing together best-in-class intellectual properties and a market-leading, diversified mobile publishing platform to enhance positioning as a global leader in interactive entertainment. Not exactly, rolling off the tongue title there. Not exactly succinct, but Take-Two buying Zynga. That's the crux of it, and they're paying just to be clear, $12.7 billion. So they're paying $9.86 per share for each Zynga stock. And they're paying it partly in cash, partly in Take-Two stock, 1/3, 2/3, and total enterprise value on Zynga of $12.7 billion, which is a 64% premium to Zynga's closing share price on January 7th. I don't know what the share price is today. Maybe Jeff, you can take a quick look. But I'm curious what you guys think in terms of, this is a huge acquisition. Activision Blizzard bought King, which I think is maybe the closest comparable. Jeff, I know you had some thoughts in terms of comparing those two, because I think you followed these.
Yeah, so I put this. I did. I covered Zynga. I covered Take-Two. This is obviously a massive deal. I think it's the biggest. Actually, it may be the biggest gaming acquisition of all time. Up there with Bethesda, which I think was $8 billion. Supercell was something in that region. So this is the biggest of all time. Just for context, so Take-Two paid $12.7 billion. That's about 17.5 times next year's EBITDA. It's a little less if you take into account some of the cost savings and synergies. Maybe it's around 15 times. Decently heady multiple, but around what these companies are worth. I mean, EA paid 22 times EBITDA for Glue, which was essentially a peak multiple right at the peak of COVID. Whereas Activision back in 2015 paid $4.7 billion for King, which was doing basically the same amount of EBITDA. So Zynga is doing 725 million, King was doing 700 million of EBITDA. They paid 6.5 times EBITDA. So basically less, a third of kind of on a multiple basis what Take-Two is paying. Now, that doesn't mean Take-Two is inherently overpaying. I think it's just a signal of Bobby, in this case, was very early buying King, and it was a very shrewd acquisition when people weren't really bought in on mobile and kind of the value, some of these the longevity really of some of these franchises. I know, at that point, King's Candy Crush's MAUs and DAUs had really plateaued, and people thought they were going to kind of fall off a cliff and monetization would disappear. That franchise is obviously sustained much longer than people expected, making that a great acquisition. For Take-Two, it's an interesting one. The big question in my mind, one, it's a big strategy shift. For the longest time, Take-Two has probably been the most focused on large, kind of non-recurring franchises. Of course, we all know with Rockstar, they basically come out with a game once every 7 years, and it sells a gajillion units, and they kind of live off that for the next 5 or 6 years. We know what they've done with GTA Online, Red Dead Online. So that's really been their model. And Strauss, their CEO for the longest time, has sort of poo-pooed mobile. Like he's been very skeptical on conference calls, really had never kind of bought into mobile prior to the last year or so. They had done a couple of decent sized acquisitions over the last year, but this is a massive step. I mean, it's going to be 50% of their business now coming from mobile. So just I think the word transformative is thrown around a lot in acquisitions, and it's a bit of a buzzword. I think in this case, it really is transformative. The big question for whether this will be successful or not is whether they're going to be able to use some of this Zynga mobile expertise to bring Take-Two games to mobile, which is something Activision did obviously with Call of Duty with a lot of success, but they bought King in 2015. They didn't come out with Call of Duty Mobile, I think, until 2019. And Call of Duty Mobile had nothing to do with King. It was actually built externally by Tencent. So it's not automatically clear that buying Zynga is going to all of a sudden mean, hey, we get Grand Theft Auto on mobile, which I think is what a lot of the kind of more rudimentary analysis has been around. Like, oh, this makes a ton of sense. Take-Two has great franchises. Mobile's massive, a lot of players. Bada bing, like put it together, and this is a great acquisition. I think execution will be a little more challenging than that. But just taking a step back, I mean, it's an accretive deal. It gives them scale, which is something they've been lacking. It'll help them catch up in terms of margin to their peers, and it'll smooth out a lot of their earnings variability, which has been a big problem for investors with Take-Two in terms of every year guessing, well, is there going to be a GTA this year? If not, well, maybe I don't want to own the stock because they're not going to earn that much money. Now with Zynga, they get a nice kind of smooth base of revenue and earnings that they can live off of. So that's some of my takes.
Lindsay, I'm curious if you agree with Jeff that there's nice synergies here potentially between, the mobile kind of Candy Crush style game, right, that Zynga makes, even though that's a King title, but these hyper casual kind of games that Zynga makes versus Take-Two. They're really, and Jeff made the point, like when Strauss was on the podcast, he even talked about this, how this is about storytelling and experience, and they were never going to do necessarily games as a service, even that this was all about selling a $60 box copy because they're delivering something of value, right? And I'm curious if you think this now seeming shift in strategy makes a lot of sense.
I suppose it depends on what the mission of the company is. I think that this is a very growth-focused move. That we've seen that from Activision as well, that the mobile division obviously has been performing past, I think, a lot of people's expectations. I think, as some of you all have noticed or have mentioned when we first kind of talked about this story, this is a little bit of a late move. So I don't think that obviously those margins will be as big because they're having to pay a lot more for this acquisition than Activision Blizzard had to play for King at the time that they made it. But I do think that it's possible to coexist with both, having Take-Two stick to its core mission in producing story-driven games, and having a wing of Zynga that is doing the hyper casual mobile thing that's obviously been growing like crazy. So Activision obviously hasn't preserved that as well because they haven't put as much time and effort into making the storytelling games and supporting Blizzard and doing all of that, which presents its own problem. But I think it's totally possible to coexist in a world where both of these things are equally as well supported and both of them maintain or surpass their current growth expectations. It just depends on, as it always does, on how management really handles it. And I don't think that this takes away from the Take-Two brand because it's not like they're renaming it Take-Two Mobile. I don't know. I think it's so possible if you're going for a growth strategy to have two separate things that your company does. And I don't think that they have to commingle or that the perception of those two has to mix that much as long as each one is equally supported and equally successful.
You know, the businessman in me that loves seeing growth and profit and all these kinds of things, the capitalist in me says, I like this. It makes sense. You know, the mobile does provide a good base of revenue, right? Like there's all kinds of good business reasons. It's accretive, all those good things. I refuse to believe, like, if I were to pinpoint, and Bobby, I think Jeff gives Bobby too much credit, Bobby Kotick at Activision Blizzard. Like, oh, I don't know if he saw the future with King. I think, you know, we could argue he got lucky. He bought mobile when it was not nearly as as popular. It could also have been total foresight, which I give him full credit if it was foresight, truly. But fundamentally, if we look at Activision Blizzard 10 or 15 years from now, I think we'll be having a different conversation, right? I think we'll look back and go, when Bobby bought King, yes, it was a good business decision at the time, but in the long run, it fundamentally destroyed the company because the culture was no longer the same. The focus wasn't the same. You know, no one cared about making great games anymore. It was about making the next slot machine and you know, ARPU and all these kind of things, like metrics that before, when it was about making great games, didn't really matter. And I'm exaggerating to make a point, but, you know, is there a world where, and Jimmy, question to you, I guess, is there a world where Take-Two, when we're talking about Take-Two 10 years from now, we'll be reminiscing, you know, remember the time Take-Two used to actually make good games and not just all this mobile crap? And I fear, you know, call it a prophecy, that is a conversation we are going to have 10 years from now. And while they may make a lot of money in the meantime, the 10 or 20 year story may be much less exciting as a result of sort of this mixed focus.
I might be the wrong guy to ask with just because the other way you phrased it, mobile crap, because we all know Paul's not a big mobile fan. I am a mobile fan, and Tencent appears to be a mobile fan, right? And now Take-Two clearly, you know, I mean, even before this acquisition was already a mobile fan. And, you know, what we're definitely seeing, you know, with the creation of the metaverse and with these different communities that are being built around esports, and a similar conversation I had with an executive at Activision a number of months ago is excitement around mobile esports and around mobile gaming in general. And so this acquisition 10, 20 years in the future, I wouldn't call it mobile crap. Maybe the future of games are going to start with mobile and everything else will kind of follow suit, right? Maybe the originals are going to come out on mobile because that's where most gamers are going to be in the future. And then the PC version comes out or the console version comes out. It could totally flip on its head. So, I don't know about mobile crap. I see this as two massive companies kind of combining forces. To Jeff's point, you know, probably the largest acquisition in the space that we've seen. I see it. This isn't some Babe Ruth calling his shot. You know, this is undoubtedly the future of kind of where these things are headed and where these gamers are trending. And I'm probably going to disagree with that prophecy.
I don't argue that there's a place for mobile games. I just it's not Take-Two's strength, and making mobile, like, again, all you guys talked about in terms of mobile was distilled down versions of their existing IP, right? Like maybe we'll see GTA on mobile, maybe we'll see Red Dead on mobile, maybe, right? First of all, I can make the argument that Take-Two could have saved a lot of money and gone to Tencent and just developed mobile versions of those games, right? If they really believed in the mobile story. And arguably, if you look at Activision Blizzard, that was what made Call of Duty a huge success. Like, Jeff, to your point, it wasn't King that made Call of Duty mobile. So if I'm Take-Two and I really believe the world needs GTA in a mobile version, I could have just gone to Tencent and done that, right? And not need to give up $12.7 billion. And I do strongly believe that, and we're seeing this trend where IP and original IP is what matters most, not mobile versions of IP, right? That milking IP is not what's driving value long term for entertainment or the metaverse. Everyone's buying up and searching for like really original IP. It's why the Marvels of the world are worth what they are, and the Disneys and these kinds of things. And so I just don't see this as a smart acquisition long term. I get why they did it. It feels a little knee jerk, a little desperation to me. I'm surprised given Strauss Zelnick's position. I wonder, behind closed doors, if he thinks this is a great idea or if there was just a lot of shareholder pressure to do something like this.
Part of that's because there were. I was going to say the stock went down a ton actually on the news. Part of that's because, of course, there's a stock component to the deal, so there's some arb selling. But there was. I mean, the stock was down I think 15 or 20, almost 20% at one point. It's actually recovered a decent amount, but it wasn't like immediate. Hey, shareholders love this.
It's funny because if you're a CEO of a gaming company, public gaming company, the last person I would say to emulate is Bobby Kotick, right? Like the train, the massive railroad accident is coming, right? The train crash is coming for Activision Blizzard. It is coming. It's not here yet, but it's coming. And I don't know why you'd want to set yourself on that same course, like mortgaging the future of your business for short-term revenue. Wani says, hi. Wani, hello. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year to you as well. Robert says, hello, Robert. How's it going? Great to have you here. And LinkedIn user says, mobile is a diamond. Or a gem, I guess. I mean, look, I don't deny how profitable and how valuable mobile gaming is and can be. I just don't understand why, when your core business is building great stories, great experiences, all those things, when those things are the core of who you are as a company, it just feels wrong. This feels totally antithetical to everything you've tried to build over the last 20 years. And I can almost guarantee this will go down as a mistake, especially at the price they paid, which is not crazy to Jeff's point, but still rich. Guys, let's talk about, unless anyone had any other thoughts on this, I want to move on. Can we talk about a little bit of I think this was an interesting story, and that's G2 Esports in the news. And I think you guys will appreciate, or Jimmy will appreciate this, especially having had some past in the music industry. And the headline here was eye-catching to me. It says, G2 Esports announces a record label launch with metal track Our Way. The power metal track is the first of many songs from G2. It's first of many in quotes, a quote from the company. It says G2 Esports has expanded into the music industry with the launch of its own record label and has marked the occasion by releasing its first track titled Our Way. It features several recognizable names in the metal genre. I'm not familiar with the metal genre, so I don't know these names, but you guys might. Jason Richardson, Luke Holland, Nura Luhimo, and features YouTuber Taylor Davis as well as Tina Guo. So G2 Esports launching a music label. Jimmy, I want to know, in your mind, is this completely genius, or is this esports teams just like really confused about who they are? No clue. Well, literally grasping at dollars wherever they can get them. I'm just I'm curious if you think this is truly visionary or it's a mistake in your mind.
It's definitely not visionary. I think it might be a little, I think it might be a little both. Who's to say the genius and crazy don't overlap, and oftentimes they do. What I'll say is, from a music perspective, you know, traditionally in 90s, pre 2000s, artists were signed to a series of deals depending on what the label believed them to be capable of. And they would offer them advances, which would be recouped against the album sales and recouped again, and after the marketing budget spend. But in essence, it was a very cut and dry. We think you're going to be big, or maybe you're a mid tier or a big artist, and here's a certain check that correlates with your value and with what we think this album's going to do. And then that all changed with Madonna and Jay-Z and these 360 deals, where labels were realizing that they were investing hundreds of millions into these names, and then only for those brands to go create a clothing line or an alcohol line and do these things without them that the label didn't get a piece of. So they started renegotiating for 360 deals, which were massive $500 million plus deals depending on the artist. And that gave the label a cut of everything. No matter what that artist did, the label felt that they built that brand through the music, and that entitled them to small percentages here and there of everything else. So what I see with G2 is kind of flipping that and also acknowledging that sooner than most, which is, hey, we're making these, again, I don't know really the nature of this. I haven't heard the song, first of all, so I don't know if it's any good. Not a metal fan, so I can't speak to the talent on that track. But what I can say is, if I am any type of business where I have talent on my roster, if that talent becomes famous because of my effort promoting them, plugging them with sponsors, giving them a platform to grow, especially in gaming where they're probably smaller and younger than most, and then that talent decides they're going to spin off and do music or anything else that really floats their boat, I'm probably going to want a piece of that, or otherwise feel like I spent a lot of money building this person up into something that I later don't have a claim towards. I'd also say that, especially in esports, where the lifespan of the competitive side of things is much shorter, it's probably a brilliant thing to, we're seeing a lot of gamers turn streamers just because, it's a little bit of a more accommodating schedule or whatnot. So I think it shows good foresight from the orgs that hey, they're looking for the long term, I think, in terms of what they can do with this talent, and also they're looking to make sure that if they spend all that money developing somebody, that they're not left high and dry after all of that.
I mean, Jimmy, you may be giving them too much credit. Like, I don't know if the article made it seem like they had thought through sort of this music label as extensively as you already have. But I guess for Lindsay, let me direct this at you. There was this quote in the article specifically where it says, on the organization's decision to kick off its record label with a metal song, G2 Esports founder Carlos Rodriguez said, "Epic power metal is my favorite genre. I don't care about its marketability. It's coming from the heart like everything else we do." And so the business person in me looks at that and goes, this is a little scary. Like, I appreciate that it's coming from the heart, but like, it sounds like we've done no research. We don't know if metal is the right thing for our audience, right? Like we haven't looked at any YouGov data, which G2, if you're listening, you should go talk to YouGov, yougov.com/gaming-esports, and figure out if there's overlap between your audience and metal. But Lindsay, does this scare you, or do you love that sort of this seems more like a gut business decision here?
I totally think that if people, I mean, we talk about this silly authenticity word all the time, but I suppose I would rather see people who can really back up what they're doing with passion, because I do think that then they'll be able to find, I would say, I don't know if to call them niche or growing communities, but I will say I've been learning a lot more about metal in particular, actually, and as it relates to gaming. And there is a pretty massive overlap. There's a super popular streamer who's also the lead vocalist for the band Trivium, which is a big one. I also was a huge Falling in Reverse fan in middle school, so shout out. I definitely was part of that. And there is, when we talk about things that are done from the heart, like he is talking about, there's a certain appreciation in these more niche communities for plays like that than there would be if they had just come out and like made a maybe a pop song or something that could have been more catchy or more popular. I don't think that this is a mega billion-dollar thing to start, but I do think that these kinds of passion projects can turn some type of profit and help you grow a community that's built on the same things that you value. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, this isn't a knock it out of the park capitalist deal for sure, but I don't think it's a net loss either. It's somewhere in the middle.
Okay, but put your like investor hat on, because all these esports teams are spending someone else's money, right? Like, if your CEO that you've invested a lot of money in their company is spending time producing metal songs when really what you've paid him to do and what you've invested in him to do is to build an esports org. Does this, like, again, if I'm the investor, I feel like I lose sleep on things like this. I feel like this would keep me up at night.
I'd have to see more of the numbers, but to Jimmy's point, it's the same thing as a singer saying that they're going to start a clothing line. You'll just never know what's going to be that thing that hits, or what's going to be that community that kind of provides you the tipping point in growing what you're doing. There is a big crossover between metal and gaming. There is an audience there that can be profitable. Is this the way of doing it? I don't know, but this is at least a shot, and I hope it didn't cost too much, and I don't think it'll lose that much either. But again, without knowing the numbers, I can't confidently say I would feel comfortable with this. So hopefully whatever story they've given to their investors is a convincing one.
Let me just read Christopher's comment here. He says, grabbing friends from the community to compete in online tournaments in esports has always made me think this is probably what it feels like to create a garage band. All the best Nordic rock I discovered gaming too. Christopher, it's a good point. It also doesn't mean that this was a good business decision. But you're right. I mean, there's definitely overlap, I guess, in that feeling. Like, playing competitive games with friends must be what it's like to be in a garage band. But I don't know if esports orgs should be directly in the music business. Jeff, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this before we move on. No, cannot. I don't know if you had thoughts before we move on.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Stupid microphone. No, I agree with the profit entirely. I mean, Lindsay, you may be right that there may be overlap between the grunge scene and esports, and that may be true, but it's really scary as a CEO just saying, well, we didn't even look into that. I'm just doing this because I want to, and screw everyone else. It's like, that is, even if you're right, that is not a process that's going to work. And I guarantee you that this will fail. And I would guess that this whole org will fail if that's the way they're running their business, right? It's just not good business. You can do that if you're Dr. Disrespect, you could do that because you're yourself, and people might appreciate that authenticity. But when you're running a business and that business is to run an esports team, it's like, why don't we just open a Chick-fil-A? Like, that'll be fun. I've always wanted to own a Chick-fil-A. Like, it's an Chick-fil-A. Like, that's not really how
this is why works. Jeff loves Bobby Kotick, though, because Bobby's like, stock price up, everything good, and Jeff's like, yeah.
That's, as an investor, I mean, that's the way we want people to run.
I love business. Jeff's analogy here. Like, why not? Why doesn't G2 open a Chick-fil-A? Like, if Carlos decides, G2 Ocelot, Carlos Rodriguez, the CEO, decides he really loves, his hearts and chicken sandwiches, would you be okay as the investor? I mean, I get music is closer to esports than chicken sandwiches, but not by much in my mind.
I mean, you're talking about the difference between creative pursuits and general business pursuits, though, too.
Yeah.
Right, but it's not a creative pursuit once you take on millions of investor dollars.
Yeah, you're not like I'm not saying you're wrong, Jeff, at all. In fact, I largely agree with you. It's just, I think that as Jimmy said, sometimes genius and crazy overlap, and sometimes it can work. So,
Christopher here says, I think it shows the personality of the individual organization and artistic side. So maybe, I mean, Christopher, it's true. And like I said, I said at the beginning when I brought up that quote, I appreciate that he's doing this from the heart and that he believes in it and the whole bit, but that would be fine if you hadn't raised outside money, if you didn't have investors who were expecting you to do one thing. I'm not. I think you make a lot of people nervous when you go this off script. But we'll see how that pans out. Guys, I want to talk about a story here that was a super hot take and from someone quite famous in the tech industry. And I want to get everyone's take on this, including people in the chat. I think I'm most curious what everyone in chat thinks of this, because I have a funny feeling I know where everyone in this room stands on this. But the quote here, or the take, was from Alexis Ohanian, who is the co-founder of Reddit. And the headline here is, Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian predicts play-to-earn crypto will be the only type of games people play in 5 years. Now, he says basically, play-to-earn crypto will be the only type of game most people play in 5 years. 90% of people will not play a game, this is a direct quote, unless they are being properly valued for that time. So in other words, unless you're getting compensation for playing a game, most people will not play those games anymore in only 5 years. His time frame is 5 years. And I just want to go around the room here, including chat, guys. I'm curious, do you agree with this or not? Will play-to-earn games be the only kind of game people will want to play 5 years from now? Is this, and do you think, he just raised, just for some context, he just raised a fund investing in blockchain-based games. We covered it on the Meta Business podcast, which everyone should go subscribe to. But so he's a little biased, right? Obviously, he wants to see play-to-earn and blockchain-based games win. But I'm really curious if you guys agree. If in 5 years these will be people won't play games unless they're being compensated for their time. Jeff, start with you.
No, I love the hot take. I'm going to go with no. However, I'm going to qualify by saying I think that he is generally right, but wrong in how extreme he's being. I think if he had said something like, I think 30% of all gameplay time will be blockchain games or pay to earn games, I think I could get behind that number. Meaning, like, let me take a step back and kind of meaning right now, if you think about, we have 3 platforms. I know this isn't the perfect analogy, right? You have mobile, console, and PC, and roughly the amount of gamers on each one is about 33%, or sorry, it's about half on mobile, 25% on console, 25% on PC. If you told me that at some point it's going to be 25% of gamers will be playing play to earn, and I know play to earn's not a platform, so it's not a perfect analogy, but if you told me it was going to make up a large portion of the player base, I'm like, I totally buy that. I'm all in on that premise. To say 90%, I think that's a bit crazy, especially within 5 years. I mean, we know 5 years from now, people will still be playing WoW. So, unless WoW goes play to earn, and I say that to dig at Paul, but no is the answer. I just think it's a little extreme, but I think he's right in how bullish he is on blockchain gaming.
So hold on, can I just push back a little bit, Jeff? If his time frame was 10 years or 15 years, do you believe we get to his 90% number? Is it just a question of time in your mind, or do you disagree with the premise completely?
I think the answer is yes, because I think in the balance of time. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My ear, it just said mute on in my ear. I think in the balance of time, we will come up with blockchain games and pay to earn. I like using the term pay and earn. I heard this on another podcast where basically it's not play to earn, it's pay and earn, meaning you're playing and you can be earning. You're not doing it you're not only there to earn, and you're not automatically going to make money, but it's just part of the ecosystem. I think eventually we'll get blockchain and play and earn games that are interesting and exciting enough where people will look at it and be like, why would I ever play a game that I don't earn money? Because they're both just as fun, right? Like every game, there will be an equivalent play and earn game to every non-play and earn game. So it'd be like, why would I play Madden where I don't earn money if I could play play and earn version of Madden, which is just as fun, and I can make some money while I'm doing it? over time. Sorry, that was really long-winded.
Jimmy or Lindsay, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this 90%. And chat, you guys, like, please chime in. I really want to know if you guys think play to earn will be 90% of the market in 5 years. That is what he's saying, that people, only 10%, but 90% of people will only play games if they're being compensated directly for their time. Jimmy?
Maybe a high percentage of Gen Alpha and Gen Z, but certainly not millennials and older. I think we have titles like Madden that Jeff mentioned and others that we know and love. So 90% seems way too high. Maybe in 50 years, then I'd probably give that a more realistic time frame. 5 years, way too aggressive, and 90% way too high. So I would limit it again to the age demographic of the younger gamers predominantly playing play to earn. Sure, I could see that.
Lindsay?
I think it depends on the market, but I think in developing countries, this is absolutely true, especially from what we've seen with the Venezuela and RuneScape. It's like the perfect case study for that. So I definitely think in lower income countries, this is probably absolutely accurate.
Inub says 90 seems very high. I mean, Lindsay, I was going to come out swinging with a very strong opinion on this. Your thought that it is more of a developing country product, maybe you could convince me. Like, I could be convinced that it has higher penetration in a lower income kind of market. I just think Alexis Ohanian is totally out to lunch here. Like, actually completely out to lunch. If I was an LP in his new blockchain-based fund, I'd be asking for my money back. Like, it shows a radical lack of understanding of the gaming market, of the gaming audience. I mean, I'd love to have him on the podcast because I'd love to ask him where he's getting this prophecy from. We're clearly not talking to the same oracle. But he's just going to be phenomenally wrong. He couldn't be any more wrong about this prediction. 5 years is completely wrong. And even if you told me the time frame was 100 years, I still think he would be completely wrong, because I think the one thing, like, he's fundamentally saying that human beings are going to turn everything that we do for fun, everything that we do for play becomes work, essentially. And that we feel like no human being has gone out to throw a baseball or play basketball with friends and been like, man, I should have been making money while I was playing basketball with my friends, right? Like, no one comes in frustrated that they're not compensated for that time. And so, like, maybe Alexis is not from this planet, but I don't think most human beings think that way.
The caveat, I guess, Paul, what if I could push back a little bit? Because I think your premise is correct, but I think Greg makes a good point about it being too soon. And then he says, we still don't have great play to earn games. And I think that's the key. So the question is, how quickly do you think that last part becomes not true? Or how quickly do we get great play to earn games? Because I'll say this to you, Paul, you are right. Nobody goes out in the backyard and throws a baseball, with their dad and then comes in and says, well, I wish I got paid. But I guarantee you, if someone said, if you go in your front yard and throw a baseball with your dad, I'll give you $50. If you go in your backyard and throw a baseball with your dad, you get nothing. You would be like, well, why on earth wouldn't we go in the front yard and throw the baseball? That's crazy. I think that is kind of that's where he's coming from, or at least that's my pushback. And how long does it take to get to that parity? I don't know.
It's so let me just bring Greg's comment on screen. He says it's way too soon. We still have great play to earn games. Jeff, your point's such a good one. And to me, this is the crux of why I know Alexis Ohanian doesn't understand the gaming market, because play to earn fundamentally, the free money doesn't get created. Okay. Like, this is not how these games work. There's no just like people who develop play to earn games. They haven't discovered money trees and they make these money trees available to people who play their game, right? They're fundamentally, for lack of a better term, glorified pyramid schemes where a small number of players make a lot of money and for the most part are funded by people who put money into the game or pay for tokens or things like that, right? And while that's good for the few who make money, it's not a free lunch. And it drives the kinds of games that they are, right? It has an effect on the kind of game that is created to be a play to earn game, because it has to have mechanisms to support what is fundamentally a pyramid scheme. And so my thesis today, and this may change, but today is I don't think we will ever see great play to earn games, and most definitely not in the next 5 years, because the format dictates the kinds of games that we get. And this is why I don't think I think it's easy to say, well, we don't have great play to earn games, so once we have great ones, everyone will be doing this. I don't think we will ever have great play to earn games, or at least there may be some better than others, but I don't think you're ever going to get, Call of Duty level kind of great play to earn games. Not in the next 5 years, probably not in the next 10 years. Maybe at some point when the ecosystem changes dramatically, maybe in that metaverse sort of universe where we're talking about gaming in a much different way. But to say it in 5 years and to think that play to earn has no impact on the gaming experience, I think he's wrong. But it's a good point. I think that is the best, strongest counter argument that, if you did make a great play to earn game, why would people play a game where you don't earn?
So, and I guess I'll give one more, because I think your point about, kind of the Ponzi scheme piece and everyone can't make money, I think is inherently, literally has to be true. If you just think about it from a mathematical and business standpoint, not everyone can make money. Just everyone can't be putting, taking money out of the ecosystem and nobody putting it in. Having said that, I think you could see a world where every game moves to some sort of paid play to earn model, but not everyone earns. Does that make sense? Where the expectation is not, hey, I'm going to go make money. It's that my items will have value. So maybe I go in and I buy $10 worth of stuff, and when I leave at the end of the day, I sell $3 worth. I sell it for $3. Like, I didn't make money, but there, it has that element and that, kind of decentralized, and you could sell your stuff. Like, maybe that's a more sustainable ecosystem.
You again, such a good point. And I think it brings up an interesting conversation in that I played the greatest play to earn game ever made. And you know what it was? It was CSGO. Because I played and I got cases, and I opened those cases and I got items, and those items sometimes were worth money, and I could sell them on Steam for a lot of money and make money by playing CSGO. And I have some very valuable items in CSGO. The difference is, I think, and it's a subtle difference, is and I think it's maybe a semantics thing. When we say a play to earn game, we really mean a game that was designed for earning, right? That you go in to play to earn, not a game where you play like CSGO where you may earn, right? And it's not the point, and it's not the goal, and it's not it's a subtle difference. And Phoenix here, let me just read his comment, because I think I'll say agrees here, but Diablo 3 had the Heraldric hamburger, and during the vanilla days, you could sell that via the auction house for a considerable amount of money, about $200. They sold constantly to the whales of the game. I mean, I think, Phoenix, the question I would have for you is, I'm sure there were some people who played to farm that item, right? So they could go sell it. But I think the vast majority probably earned items in the game that they sold because they were playing the game for fun, not because they were playing to earn. And maybe that's an important distinction. Maybe it's not. Einub says, I like playing games to unwind and relax. I can see having some mix of play to earn, but I cannot imagine myself only playing play to earn. Einub's, I agree with you. And I think most gamers probably feel that way. I think so. Let's move on, guys. Can we do everyone's favorite segment? Which I'm going to get to. But before I get to that, I just want to say that this live stream, this weekly news show, very generously sponsored by YouGov, guys. If you don't know, YouGov produces the absolutely best data on gamers, games, fans, esports fans all around the world. If you're at all working in the gaming space, if you're a brand, if you're a team, if you're even on the outskirts of gaming, if you're thinking of selling something to the gaming audience, you absolutely need to be talking to YouGov. They really produce data that helps drive great decision making. They have a bunch of free reports. You can find them at yougov.com/gaming-esports. I'm going to put that in the chat. But also, I highly recommend two things. One, going and checking out on YouTube. You can find segments under the business of esports called YouGov Insights, where we talk about a lot of the data that they produce. And they're a lot of fun, some really interesting stats. I think you guys will learn a lot. So definitely go check that out. YouGov Insights on business of esports on YouTube. And finally, if you need to reach out to anyone at YouGov directly, please feel free. Talk to Jimmy, Jeff, Lindsay, or me. We can all connect you with YouGov. And we really appreciate their support. So, all right, let's get to everyone's absolutely favorite segment. If you don't know, if you're new to the live stream, guys, we are not just the most important news outlet for gaming business news, but we are also the global, sort of the most important gaming chair reviewers, because nothing more important than a gaming chair when it comes to gaming. And so we have a story. Jeff, you got to pay attention. You're not going to get out of this one. And we have a story from CES, actually. And this is a Razer gaming chair this time. And the headline here is Razer's first vibrating gaming chair is the Enki Pro HyperSense. This is following the release of the Razer Isker. The company went big with its vision for gaming chairs in CES 2021. It includes haptic feedback thanks to a partnership with D-Box. There's this really cool video. But basically, the idea is the chair is going to cost about $2,000. They are going to release it Q1 2022, according to this. And basically, it has all the same features as the original Enki, but now it can do 65,000 haptic variations with a latency of 5 milliseconds. So it gives you that much more immersion into the game because your chair is vibrating. Guys, I know you all love this. It's a Razer gaming chair with haptic feedback. D-Box, very well known in the sim racing world. Lindsay, start with you. Where does this rank on your pantheon of chairs, gaming chairs?
What is haptic feedback?
You know, like when you press something on your phone screen, and it gives you sort of a little vibration, so it makes it feel like you're pressing a button kind of thing. It's those vibrations that can simulate certain things.
Or like an IMAX. You ever gone to like an IMAX?
I was just gonna say, remember those movies? They would like vibrate the chair and like blow wind on your legs if you were moving really fast.
That's exactly what this chair does.
Yeah.
Well, not the wind, but the vibration part.
Very high for me.
No. What if they made a tiny version of it? Then you'd like it. That's not fair.
Then I'd be in.
Jimmy, I know you like this. Come on.
I think everyone's getting a little too cutesy with their chairs and a little too just too kind of how can we make this bigger, innovative? All I want is a chair that has a built-in heater and a massager. Like that's it. You know, maybe some LED so it matches the glow of my mouse and keyboard. But I'm not a racing guy, so I wouldn't care for it to feel it this way or that way, or I don't know. I don't really like those IMAX chairs either, but maybe I'm just sounding old and cranky now.
You wouldn't like playing Call of Duty or Fortnite, and when you get shot, you feel like the rumble in your seat, you know, you feel like that little haptic kind of feedback. I feel like the immersion is great in a gaming chair.
Yeah, and then I can put on a vest when I play Call of Duty, and I could feel like I'm taking bullets in the chest whenever I get shot at next. No, I'm just not that kind of guy, I guess. I like haptic on my phone, but I don't know if I need it in my chair. Plus, now how are we powering this? Like, what does that look like? Am I gonna have to charge?
The chairs all have to be plugged in.
That's one less thing I want to worry about.
I mean,
I won't get an Apple Watch.
Battery.
Yeah.
To be clear, all these chairs that have any kind of electronics, they're plugged in. They're not on battery power.
Yeah. No, call me a boomer. That's a pass for me.
I don't have it. I I like the haptics. I think it's cool. You know, if I'm playing my Madden, it feels like I'm getting tackled. I'm in. Let's do it.
Finally,
Sign
we
me up.
found one the Juice likes. I will say, I will bring this up. Tom's Guide also agrees with me. It says they said this was the cooling gaming chair we may never see. It could
Why
be
are we
the
never gonna
next
see it?
evolution of gaming chairs. So I really like this. I love Razer's innovation and the way they push the industry forward, just in general, just business sort of commentary. They really do great. Like, they really have great ideas. Whether all of them come to life or not, whether all of them are a success or not, sort of doesn't matter. They really do innovate, and I like that. Einub says, I turned that off on my controller. I'm not interested in my whole chair vibrating. I mean, Einub's, you're right. It may not be conducive to high performance gaming, but I could see the immersion score being quite high on something like that. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about, we have a couple of stories here. I just want to mention this one. This is a quick one because it matched an article we talked about last week, and we may get to a lightning round here in a second, guys. But this one was Twitter reports gaming delivered 2.4 billion tweets in 2021. So huge amount of tweets related to gaming on Twitter. But if you look at the most tweeted about games, do you guys remember? I don't have it up, but the story we did last week about the most the games that generated the most revenue on Steam and that were played the most and the whole bit. Genshin Impact and Apex were up there, if you guys remember. And they were also number 1 and 2 in the most tweeted about games. Anyone surprised to see sort of the top 5 here, most tweeted about games, or even the top 10? Anyone surprised that Call of Duty is not on here whatsoever?
If it was, it would have been for angry tweets.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's what,
This isn't always good,
I mean,
yeah.
that was my question. That's why I asked that.
It is
Can you
surprising.
read the
It is
top 10?
almost
It was hard
surprising,
to see.
Sorry, I'll read the top 10. In the top 10, Genshin Impact number 1, Apex number 2, Ensemble Stars 3, Final Fantasy 4, FGO Project 5, Animal Crossing 6, Game Knives Out 7, Minecraft 8, PJ Sakai 9, Fortnite 10. There's a lot that's not on this list. Jimmy, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think it speaks more towards what gamers are using Twitter as opposed to what games are popular in general, right? This speaks towards that overlap. Because if we were going to look at the most posted about on Instagram or on TikTok or YouTube, all these would change, and I'm sure plenty would fall off. Interesting that Fortnite's in that top 10 still. You know, it's holding strong, even though it's had a rough 3 or 4 years now. Animal Crossing on Twitter, because I always thought Twitter aged a little older because of all the news content there. So I don't know if that's people like my fiance that are playing Animal Crossing who never let me play it because she was always using our Switch. But but honestly, the coolest thing about that list to me is Apex, because I think Apex is a great game. A lot of people were leaving COD for it and other games. It had a great resurgence this year. And, you know, they need to look at that data and see that people are talking about them and figure out a way to capitalize and hold strong and not lose out to Splitgate and Halo and all these other titles that are really making FPS a competitive space. So I would just say that's a Twitter a list, not a anything else list, but it's still pretty cool to look at and analyze.
I mean, this is why I was a little bit surprised, because Apex and Fortnite on the top 10 and no Call of Duty. To me, Call of Duty was the big, like the one that you can, because they have Call of Duty Mobile also, you know, with 100 million whatever players. Am I wrong to conclude that maybe I have my doubts about the Call of Duty numbers? I don't know if I'm jumping into too big of a conclusion. The data doesn't seem to fit.
Well,
I'm
you can see
doubting
the Call of
Activision
Duty
Blizzard's
numbers
number.
very easily, right? Because they break out by segment, and it's the only thing that Activision actually
Well,
makes.
it's reported by Activision Blizzard, right?
Well, it's like their SEC gap reported, revenue numbers. I don't think they're like, unless you're going to call it like a complete
Just don't know.
accounting scam.
No. What I'm saying is I don't know again, because especially in Asia, like it's easy to sort of play with user numbers and things like that, right? Like someone who downloads Call of Duty plays it once and then never plays it again. Like, do they call that a user? I'm just, when I see no discussion around a game, which is really what this article's about, right? It makes me a little worried that what's happening with the game in an underlying way.
That's a good point. I mean, it's certainly not. It's a worrying trend if you're Activision. I would say, like to Jimmy's point or someone's joke earlier, it would be interesting to see sentiment around I forget. There's a bunch of these services where you could track sentiment as in addition to mentions. It would be interesting to see if any of these were up there for negative reasons. Nothing immediately comes to mind, but to your point with the Vanguard launch, obviously there could have been some negative tweets about that. Same thing with Halo. A lot of these New World, a lot of these negative, launches.
I know as an interesting point here, which I think could be one of the reasons. This could be split between Vanguard, Warzone, Mobile, all as separate games, not being collected as one. That's true. It could just be a case of the chatter is split among all those different properties. All right, guys, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about this was an interesting one. Hang on here. It's interesting. Actually, let's do a lightning round, guys. I think we have a few stories that would be more fun to do in a lightning round kind of fashion. So I'm going to, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to bring up a few stories in rapid succession here, guys. And we're going to hit on them everyone has about a minute to respond. Because I think there's a few here I want to get to, and we won't have time if we do each one of them in depth here. So let me start with this one. We're going to go in alternating order. I'm going to do Jimmy, Lindsay, Jeff, and then Jeff, Lindsay, Jimmy. And the headline here: Korean gaming giant Nexon buys $400 million stake in Avengers Directors Entertainment Company. So this is Nexon, which is South Korean gaming giant. They bought a 38% stake in entertainment company AGBO. AGBO was founded by brothers Joe and Anthony Russo, who directed Avengers Endgame, and they valued AGBO at $1.1 billion. In 2020, AGBO produced Extraction. I have not seen it, but it's supposedly one of the most watched original Netflix films. And the quote here from Nexon says, "Film and television have been proven to drive higher engagement and longevity for game franchises, and we are now partnered with the best creators and adapters of franchise IP in film and television." $400 million stake, Nexon buying into fundamentally an entertainment company. I want to get your guys' general thoughts, obviously, in your minute, but also specifically as it relates to the conversation we had around Take-Two buying Zynga, and the comment I made on IP being maybe the most valuable. To me, this felt like a way better buy, but I'm curious what you guys think. Jimmy, start with you.
Immediately, that comment that you had about IP is where my mind went. Extraction's a pretty good film on Netflix if you haven't seen it. Chris Pine, I think, the one that played Thor, and an Indian boy and some drug lord dispute in India and Bangladesh. Really entertaining watch. But to me, what it really says is you have a gaming company here hiring two brilliant minds that are known for putting out big blockbuster type films. Always a tough line to cross, right? Because we've seen it done poorly, we've seen it done really, really well, and this is not just a small investment, right? What do you say, 38%? Massive.
Yeah.
I'm gonna appreciate the risk, and I'm also gonna appreciate that they're going big on it. And I'm a fan of both of those films. And if you approach it as, hey, we want your minds because you come up with great storytelling, and we can incorporate that into a game, as opposed to them saying, oh, they're gonna create the Extraction video game, I'd probably be less bullish on it. So I think this is pretty cool. We need to have like a yes or no thing going on here, but I'm going to say
I think we're going to do that next week. Lindsay, go ahead.
This is too bold for me. I think that there's been a flood of recent gaming media content. Like we have Last of Us and Uncharted coming out. There was just Arcane, which it's all been successful to its credit, but we're getting to a point where there's a lot of it, and I don't know that any of them, other than Arcane, like there's been a lot of, I mean, we all know a billion gaming movies that have also failed. So I don't know that I don't know that I am super confident that this is like a smash hit, knock it out of the park. But like Jimmy said, I do appreciate the risk. And if you have the money and you're going to take the risk, you might as well go after one of the best studios and really go for it. So it's a little bold for me, but I certainly hope it works out for them.
Jeff?
I mean, this is the Russo brothers, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. These guys literally invented the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, whatever project they do is going to work. It's going to get bought by some, Netflix or whoever. Even if it's not very good, it's probably going to make money. So I always think about, like, would you not, if it was your own personal money, like, you wouldn't invest in this? I mean, I would be putting as much as I could into this project if I had the opportunity to do so. I think when you bet behind creatives like this, like you're bound to win in this world, just because I think you can win even if the project itself loses. Like, I don't necessarily think whatever content they create has to even be that good for this actual company to make money and you to make money on your investment. And I would just note, this isn't the first time Nexon's done something like this. I had remembered that this was something they'd done in the past, so I Googled it quickly, and they actually have a history. Like, last year in March, they invested $1.5 billion in Hasbro, Bandai Namco, Konami, and Sega. And basically, it's just they have a bunch of free cash flow and money laying around, and they like to invest it kind of in companies with strong global IP that they think are undervalued. To me, that's a little bit more odd. Like, I would rather, if I were an investor in Nexon, I'd rather them return that money to shareholders or reinvest it in the business. But in terms of them investing here in a private round with the Russo brothers, like, this is a home run to me, I think.
I agree. I really like this. And I think, to your point, they only needs a couple of one or two hits here, not even hits. And the valuation seems very, very reasonable in a world, where movies and games can easily generate billions of dollars. And with Nexon behind it and, the Russo brothers and this kind of power behind them, I really like this. But you mentioned Sega, Jeff. So this is the next one I'm going to bring up. It's Sega in the news. And the headline here is Sega cites fan backlash in surprisingly cautious take on gaming NFTs. It says, if it is perceived as a simple money making, Sega would like not to proceed. So, after the reaction, if you remember, to Ubisoft's kind of, NFT integration into their games, Sega has taken a more cautious approach. They've cited negative elements in quotes. They've said they need to carefully assess what will be accepted and what will not be by the users. They also said they would like to try out various experiments, and they've already started many different studies and considerations in the space, including so-called play-to-earn games. We talked at length about play-to-earn. Is Sega here taking the right approach, or will history say that they were too cautious? Jeff, start with you.
I think they're taking the right approach. I mean, we've seen this negative backlash a number of times. And if you're interested in this kind of topic, I mean, this is another plug for Meta Business. I mean, this is what we talk about for the most part on that podcast. So please check that out. I think we've discussed this on a couple of those podcasts. I'm starting to think, that there's sort of two separate communities, and you have gamers and then kind of crypto enthusiasts. And the early adopters of these new blockchain and Web3 games are going to be the crypto enthusiasts and not necessarily the hardcore gamers that are fans of Sega and played Sonic, 40 years ago. So I do think that they're probably smart to dip their toe in, and some of these bigger AAA studios are going to have to either acquire teams and IP and content that resonates with this other group of kind of crypto enthusiasts, or maybe create different brands, like doing it in their existing games, like a Sonic, a blockchain Web3 version of Sonic is going to tank and the community is going to hate it. So, yeah.
Lindsay, your thoughts on Sega's tepid approach here?
I don't think that taking a measured approach to such an amorphous space is necessarily a bad thing. They're indicating that they're going to put feelers out and try different things and see what works best for their community. I don't know why there would be such a backlash to that kind of thing.
Jimmy, does Sega just care more about their gamers than Ubisoft does? You're muted.
Thank you. They care too much about their gamers. This is a very vocal, loud minority, and gamers make us think about a lot of things. I think if I'm a business, then I should do what makes my business money, right? I mean, I think what the joke here is that Sega is trying to say that they're not going to do something inauthentic, which is another word that we hear often. But Sega, there's a lot of money in NFTs right now. There's a lot of hype and FOMO and all these things. We've seen Louis Vuitton and Burberry do it pretty well and kind of interesting with those mobile games. And so Sega's has some really cool IP. The Sonic movie, the second one's coming out this year. So they're kind of on a relative hot streak, and I mean relative to them. Why, I didn't care for that comment because just do what you think is gonna appease your audience and generate I don't know profit for your business. Why would you listen to like the one guy that's yelling this sucks?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. It could be a very, very vocal, very small minority. It's a good point, and maybe they're making a stake as a consequence. But I don't think anyone long term. There's still so much opportunity. I don't know if anyone will fault them for taking a more measured approach. They may not win as big, right? If this pans out to be the next big thing, but the cautious approach doesn't seem like a terrible idea. Guys, one last one here, and I love this one because it's another Prophet was right moment. And this is Phil Spencer, I feel like, has been on a tear with some of his commentary around gaming. Obviously, he's the head of Xbox at Microsoft, and here he says the headline is Netflix is moving into games in a very smart way, Phil Spencer says. So I'll just read the first sentence. It says Phil Spencer thinks Netflix is smart for leveraging its successful streaming business and jumping into video games. He says, I think it's smart what Netflix is doing. They're buying some studios. They're learning about the creative process of interactive entertainment. And I think it's a very smart way for them to move into the space. He says, Xbox has taken a page from Netflix's book with Xbox Game Pass. He says, from a streaming standpoint, he says, Xbox Game Pass, which has long been popularly called the Netflix for games, something Spencer doesn't disagree with. He says, from a streaming standpoint, it is, in other words, the Netflix for games. I'd say the difference for us is in the business model of you can buy every game that's available on the subscription, which is a little different than a music subscription or a movie subscription. Spencer says the transactions business is still Xbox's biggest business and bigger than subscriptions, though he says subscriptions are growing faster. So I'm curious what you guys think of Phil Spencer's evaluation of Netflix's approach to gaming. I know we had a long conversation on a previous live stream about, did we think Netflix was being too careful, not jumping in big enough, not doing things big enough? Phil Spencer seems to think this, again, more measured approach, maybe that's the theme of these last two stories, is the right one. Jeff, what do you make of Phil's commentary here, given that in some ways Netflix could become a competitor to Xbox Game Pass?
Well, you sort of stole my thunder a little bit. I won't get into too much about my thoughts on Netflix because we have covered that a lot in the past. I was on the opposite side of you, the Prophet, so I am in the position of disagreeing here with Phil Spencer. I don't think Netflix has done enough to make a big splash. Having said that, I am not surprised that Phil Spencer is saying this, given that Netflix could potentially become a big competitor if, say, they went out and bought an Activision Blizzard or, a Sony or something like that. So Phil Spencer's kind of praising them for not coming and competing with him. So, yeah, I think I generally agree with Phil Spencer. And I think he's obviously very well respected in the industry. I don't necessarily agree with him on this take. Netflix going in big would have been a riskier move, but I think ultimately if they want to do anything really meaningful that impacts their actual business in game, their overall enterprise value, what they're doing now is not going to make a difference. It's kind of mice nuts, so they need to make a bigger move.
Lindsay, where are you on the Phil Spencer view on Netflix here?
Well, he clearly listened to our live stream when I said that I thought it was
Obviously.
great that Netflix released those games and could collect a bunch of data on the game industry and the users and try to figure out how they could make a big splash. So obviously he's listening to me, which I very much appreciate. Phil, you
We'll
and
send
I,
him an
same
invoice
thoughts.
for Lindsay's consulting time.
Yeah, the invoice it will be sent to you. Please respond accordingly. Thank you.
Jimmy.
Well, what I thought was clever about this was, seemingly an article about Netflix, but it just kind of goes on to praise a lot of Microsoft's products and approaches to things. So, I don't really have much more to say, I don't think, besides Jeff and Lindsay, other than we've talked about Netflix at length. I think they're different target audiences, and I just thought it was a funny way for him to be like, oh yeah, they're doing it right. And by the way, here's everything that Microsoft does and why it's, why we're different and why we're killing it too.
Look, I obviously, it's nice to see him praise what is a would-be competitor. I think he's always been well respected because he speaks, his mind, and I think he's just very insightful in terms of the gaming industry in general, obviously, given how long he's been in it and what he's built. But you want my tinfoil hat theory that we may see Phil Spencer going to run Netflix's gaming and build Netflix's gaming business? Just a tinfoil hat theory. But it's not impossible, right? It's not
Mark it down. Mark this down. We're good.
I think if he goes anywhere, he goes to Activision. I think he's one of the few guys that can credibly take over for Bobby and actually be an improvement.
That's a good, assuming Bobby
challenge.
leaves or gets pushed.
Yeah, if we
pushed
assume,
out.
yes.
And the challenge of a sinking ship might be an interesting one for him, right? So you're right, that may be a very attractive move. But Netflix also has deep pockets, could attract a guy like Phil if they really get serious about gaming. So that's an interesting one to watch. Guys, that wraps up this week's episode. I hope everyone I hope everyone enjoyed it. A couple of reminders. We do this every Wednesday evening. We start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Would love for anyone who listens, who watches, if you watch it as a VOD after the fact, bring your friends, bring your family, bring your colleagues. The more the merrier here. We love to see new faces here, asking questions in the chat, making comments, getting in our faces. It makes it so much more fun. Stay tuned for the episode of Business of Esports, which comes out tomorrow. And every single week, guys, Monday and Tuesday, you get new episodes of Meta Business and Meta Woman. Make sure to subscribe to those two podcasts as well. They're completely different podcasts from the Business of Esports. So you have to subscribe to all three. You can't be a fan of just one. You have to subscribe to all three. It's a package deal. So make sure you go and do that. Einup says, great episode, guys and gals. Appreciate it as always. Einups, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you having here. All of you guys, even if you're lurking, we really appreciate having you guys. Go follow us everywhere. Biz Esports or Business of Esports on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. Literally every social platform under the sun. We put all kinds of content out. And some of it's original content too that you don't get anywhere else. So make sure to follow all our socials. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.